Hello guys, this is your friend Saiyan Paradox Audio Fanfic and we are back in new fanfic. What if future Trunks was born a girl? Dragon Ball Z Alternate Timeline Part 2. Bulma expected everything and anything from the young man that saved their world less than 2 weeks earlier. She saw how he stood to face Vegeta's relentless assaults all afternoon, evening and a good portion of the night, in that oddly angelic golden form. She remembered how firmly but somewhat softly he pushed her away when she berated his smoking habit. She saw pain in his blue eyes, which had seemingly seen more death than she could fathom. She knew the teen's meek smile was deceptive, in a non-malicious way. He seemed to weigh his words carefully around everyone, nobody wanted a temporal paradox or whatever. She thought he looked at her with attraction and desire. His gaze was intense when he looked at her, but that was normal. I'm Bulma brief, come on. I miss my mother, just didn't compute. Bulma rarely found herself speechless, but right there and then she had no words. And the kid didn't elaborate, didn't ask for anything, he just stated his piece and that was it. She rubbed his shoulder through the towel, gently. Trunks didn't flinch, she was used to a similar touch by her own mother, and it gave her a sense of comfort, but she also didn't move like she would have, at home. She really wanted to lean in, embrace her mother, touch her hair, her arms, her face, and fall asleep with her like she often did, even past childhood, but she reminded herself this was not her. She stared straight ahead, in an effort to protect her secrets, her eyes unable to focus on much of anything. If she looked back at this younger version of Bulma, she'd see her mother, and all gods knew the genius would piece things together if she saw that look. The two stayed in silence for a few minutes until the teenager straightened her back, put both hands on her knees and stood away, with much mental strain, from the comforting touch. See you in the morning, she whispered without a glance, using the last of her resolve to make sure her voice betrayed her armor as little as possible, and she disappeared into the bathroom to take a much-needed and deserved shower where she could break down in relative safety. The shower actually made it worse, and she took it cold, which brought back the memories of when she found Gohan's body. She let her tears mix with the water and mentally cursing about a mother who thought that perhaps she might not come back, the cyborgs who took everything in the name of fun, the stubborn, asinine man Vegeta was, the blasted militias who profited from the despair of her world, and herself, for not having been strong enough to be trusted by Gohan to fight by his side. She let it all go, the quiet sobs drowned under the shower. After a while, she was able to pick the pieces and carry on. Hopefully, this era's Bulma didn't hear her. She woke up early and stayed in pajamas in the room, letting her body free from the disguise for a few more hours, and decided to access the briefs network alongside the documentation. Breakfast could wait. Her mother usually slept in when she didn't pull all-nighters, so she guessed this version of her also would wake up late. She could use the extra hours of conscious solitude, taking the necessary time to duct tape quick fix her mind and spirit back together, before putting on the social mask again. Might as well focus on something tangible, something that would advance her mission. Her feelings didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. The workshop was an organized chaos for the engineer, but everything digitally stored on the system was properly labeled and organized. Even the hidden folders under code names. She'd only find them because she knew where to look. Is it hacking if a future version of you gives me your passwords to get to the central server, mother? Especially when the computer she used was a computer that already existed in the system. Trunks started a copy-paste procedure for different folders, by order of priority. If you can get the research I lost when the lab and server were destroyed, her mother had asked her, just in case she got the opportunity. Charging the time machine had taken 8 months because she didn't have all of her and her father's research anymore, more so than the equipment. Trunks had no idea how all of it worked, but she seized the opportunity. She let it process and in the meantime, she browsed the network's documents. She was somewhat tech-savvy, but most of the stuff was way above her level of understanding, or boring to tears. Including precise health logs for every single animal in the compound, their diet, their personality, and all of the administrative details. The little black cat she lost a staring contest to was actually a bioengineered prowess, and its name was Tama. Hours of browsing, and the only thing, arguably, worthwhile she learned was the cat's name. She dozed off for a few minutes, scrolling, and suddenly got excited. The GR logs. She bit her lip in anticipation. Something she could understand, and that was interesting. She read the first entries from about 2 years prior. She didn't expect them to be about Goku, but she did some mental math with a good look at the dates. These were automatic logs monitoring Goku's vitals and training efforts when he went to Namek. Activity cycles, resting cycles, pressure and gravity data. She could use this. Wait, wasn't that ship destroyed with the planet? It was, but during the whole trip, it communicated with Earth twice a day to update on its course. Of course it would update to the server. And there were dozens of more logs, all probably from the past 18 months or so. Vegeta's training. Jackpot. A knock at her door stopped her in her tracks. Tora-kun. Lunch. It's almost noon. Bulma's voice asked. Her stomach reminded her she skipped breakfast. Should I lost track of time? Yes. Sorry. I'm coming, thank you. She checked the copy-paste status of the selected folders, and then launched the arguably faster copy of the GR logs. Text files were so much lighter than schematics and 3D renders and whatnot while she got dressed. Binder. Light blue tee, black pants, beloved boots, side part. After everything was copied, she put everything back into capsules, back into the case, and hid it again in the room. She closed her room, extended her senses briefly to check on Vegeta, still asleep, and came down to the kitchen area in hurried steps. My parents are out for the day, Bulma welcomed in a white capsule tee and red jeans, browsing the fridge. Vegeta's probably not going to wake for at least another day, so we've got the day to ourselves. Watcha wanna eat? Trunks sat at the kitchen table. I overslept, to be perfectly honest. Toast and coffee is fine by me. Bulma laughed. Late breakfast it is then. Fine by me. Can't really burn toast anyway. A few burnt attempts later, Trunks eventually made the toasts for the two of them herself. No version of her mother could be trusted with anything that wasn't just add water, meals, but she kept tight-lipped. If it had been her mother, she'd never let her live it down. When she'd be back, however, she'll roast her in lieu of her past self. You seem better, the older woman eventually observed. Good coffee makes everything better. Trunks had to somehow softly deflect, but held her mug high as a sign of genuine gratitude to the sweet dark nectar. Bulma matched the gesture with a small fake prayer to the caffeine gods. They ate in silence a little until Bulma eventually went back to the topic. It's fine to stop pretending. She poured more coffee for the both of them while the teenager looked away and just drank, not liking one bit where this was heading. Look, I understand you've got to lie to us else the universe might implode or whatnot, but I'm Bulma Brief. You can trust me and be yourself, okay? It's precisely because you're Bulma Brief that I can't, really. Trunks admired all versions of her mother, and the cause of her admiration was why she had to be especially careful around her. She focused on the butter she was putting on toast instead of looking at her, despite her expectation. Eventually she decided to somewhat give in. She chose another approach, put down the knife and toast, and looked up, dropping the mask with a sigh. Bulma-san, I am like this in my world as well, narrow pupils piercing straight through the other. It's a matter of sheer survival and preservation. I am not well, never been, never will be, she smiled, hopeful and bright despite the grim words. Darkness screamed in her mind. Pretending is what keeps me out of the pits of despair and self-destructive rage. I assure you I am addressing the root cause, and I will win in the end, she promised with kinder eyes. They spent the rest of the day tinkering in the lab, the heiress giving up temporarily on cracking that nut. The following couple of weeks at the briefs was a mismatch. There was no real daily routine once Vegeta woke up. Whether he remembered the conversation he and his would-be daughter had during their spar, Trunks never found out. The teen split her time between assisting Bulma with the repairs, who had noted and praised the teen for not giving in to the nasty smoking habit, reading Vegeta's GR logs and testing theories on him while letting him exhaust himself on her, and enjoying surprising amounts of alone time with the brief's menagerie. Tama won his second round on staring contest. Once the gravity system was fixed and the upgraded version installed, however, Trunks stopped meeting the full-blooded Saiyan and just kept an eye on the monitoring systems. Dr. Brief also took over helping Bulma with the repairs, which gave her more time to venture in the city to observe what normal life was like. What normal stores were like. What traffic looked like. What schools looked like. She replaced jealousy with determination. When checking the GR logs and comparing performances from different days, she realized Bulma had, perhaps unconsciously, noticed before her what she finally managed to theorize on her own. Her efforts to exhaust Vegeta, without actually wounding him, to the point of unconsciousness forced him to rest and let his body recover. Bulma often screeched at him to stop when he wounded himself against the robots, who were no joke, and the augmented gravity. It was a strain on his body and he never stopped long enough to fully rest. He refused until his injuries forced his body to collapse. Bulma managed sometimes to get him out before it got that far, either through challenges, taunts or the offer of meat. It became clear, Vegeta trained too much and it affected his progress. And Bulma, and the several forced breaks she caused, kept that issue at bay. It was fascinating. Bulma was why Vegeta's training became more efficient. Everything stopped abruptly when Bulma came knocking fast at her door during an afternoon nap. Tora-kun. Tora-kun. The Dragon Balls. They're active. Trunks knew how to pack and leave fast, but she wasn't sure she ever did it this fast. Capsule case in pocket, sword on her back, Bulma had knocked when she was dressing up after a little afternoon nap. The time traveler almost tripped on the way down the stairs because she didn't secure her boot straps properly and was doing that while skipping on the stairs. The blue-haired woman waited for her by the open door, and the teenager barely stopped by her. She was ready to go right now. Trunks may have had loose pants with men's pockets, but a bag was still better to collect the precious spheres, which is why Bulma put on the teenager's shoulder a thick beige messenger bag with some snacks and a large capsule case the other would notice later. Haven't forgotten any. Nothing important. Know the PHR. Come forth, Shenron, and grant my wish. There's 7, they're about this size, they're yellow with orange stars. She was worse than a child on Christmas Day who hasn't been authorized to open her gifts, but who could blame her? Bulma put the dragon radar in her hand, but held said hand between hers so the teenager wouldn't instantly bolt. I'll want that ba. I'll give it back. I'm off. And thank you. With a kid's smile, she couldn't resist giving a quick peck on the cheek to the younger version of her mother, and took off without caring that she was in the middle of the city. She stopped midway through, flew back to the GR, and caught Vegeta's attention with a brief salute. He spared her a look from the ship's window, and went back to his training. Dr. Brief and Panchi waved her off from the balcony, and she returned the gesture before disappearing in the horizon. Bulma promptly called the Sun household to let them know what their time traveler guest was up to. Chi-Chi would relay the message to Goku at dinner time when he and Gohan came back from training. The engineering genius was filled with nostalgia, remembering the day of her own departure during that summer holiday, and how her own mom had given her a bag and a bunch of capsules before she went on her adventure. The dragon radar wasn't hard to manipulate, especially as her mother had given her hers, with instructions on how to use it before she left. She wasn't going to tell this timeline's Bulma she already had a dragon radar in her possession. A few bips later, and Trunks could see directions, overall distances, and the soft flickering LED indicating the precious sphere locations. Combined with the topographical map integrated in her watch, she more or less planned a semi-efficient route, and flew off as if she tried to set a world record for fastest person to collect the Dragon Balls. Finding the precious wishing orbs wasn't exactly complicated. They'd just reactivated, so people hadn't found them as pretty objects yet. It was a matter of where they'd landed. Trunks didn't expect nor find any tangible resistance from the terrain or nature. This wasn't the initiatory journey it had been for her mother. The circumstances were so different, and yet they had something in common. They were the same age for their first Dragon Ball hunt. By dusk, and with 3 of the precious spheres secured, the time traveler needed to take a break. Her sword had sliced through the roots of the rotten woods of some swamp, but she still needed to walk through the terrain to find the precious 5-starred sphere deep in the stagnant black waters. Once back on firm land, she popped the capsule home to clean up and change into a warmer set of clothes with a windbreaker, and took a moment to snack as well. It was then she saw Bulma's large capsule case. While eating, she opened it up to check what it was. First, a note, put them to good use. And a little drawing by Bulma of herself with victory fingers. Then the labels corresponding to each number, written by hand. A few different rides, including a little submarine plane combo, a couple of houses, a disaster relief hospital, a solid amount of military rations, and most importantly, a dozen power generators. Trunks held back her tears at the kindness. It may have not been from her mother, but she could see the similar foresight and kind heart the 2 Bulmas shared. There was no way something so insignificant as sleep or night time would keep her far apart from her mother any longer. The 5th ball was deep under a ton of sand. A whole lot of ki, and probably a decent shake on the planet's crust later. She held the 4-starred one, and she gave it a content smile, remembering from the stories her mother told her how important this one in particular was for Goku, and how Gohan wore it on his hat as a toddler. She checked the direction for the next one and started to fly when Gohan and Goku popped out of goddamn nowhere near her. Startled, she gasped and moved back in the air, then calmed down when she realized who it was. The both of them were still in their training GI for the day. "Hey, what ya doin'?" Goku knew, and radar in one hand, ball in another. The answer was obvious, and the man was just about as jovial as she was for some reason. "Flying around. Doing a little landscape." Trunks laughed, putting her recent acquisition in her bag. "Yeah, figures, that's how I tracked you." Goku pointed at the crater underneath. "Kai told me Bulma told her you'd be leaving after your wish." "Yes. I did all I could to change the course of history for the better for you, without either erasing myself out of existence nor deleting the universe." She started flying, slower than before, in the direction of the 6th ball, fully expecting the 2 to follow. They did after checking their presence was accepted. "Tora-san, why don't you stay and train with us until they arrive?" Gohan had to ask. He sounded sad. She'd considered it on a practical level, of course, but the logistics of it would be too much of a pain to handle. "The short answer is that I miss my mother, Gohan-san, and she only has me to protect her," she apologized. Gohan understood. He loved his mom too. The longer answer was that she didn't want to influence anyone's life any further, and she knew her presence affected Vegeta somehow, and she feared she may not be born because of it. Her parents should still find each other in their stubbornness and respective pride. With or without the impending threat, Vegeta trained to surpass Goku in her timeline after all. Seeing the radar indicate proximity, she landed in rocky dusty terrain with the other 2 in tow. She zoomed in the radar and walked. "It should be around here somewhere." Gohan and Goku searched as well, the older saying it brought back so many memories. They turned a few of the bigger boulders. A few minutes in, Gohan caught the starlight bouncing off the precious ball hidden in a bush, making it shine from an angle he only could see. He quickly came back holding it up for the teenager, beaming. She took it and put it in the bag with a thankful smile. Good eyes, Gohan-san. The trio came together to look at the radar to find the last one. Trunks compared the radar with her watch, and looked ahead. Probably the mountain formation in the distance. Ya got 6 already. Goku was shocked the teen had been so quick. They took off in the direction of the missing wishing orb. Yes, the sooner I can leave, the sooner I can come back. Relatively speaking. They traveled the few hundred kilometers separating them from the last ball, and Goku used the opportunity to probe for something that was itching. How was it with Vegeta? I felt you two spar a couple of times. Oh, no, we didn't spar. He tried to kill me. Trunks snickered, and zoomed on the radar to adjust her path. Gohan gasped at the worrying revelation, but the teen shook her head to show it was okay. I learned a lot, she admitted with a pleased smile. Not only she forced herself to maintain the transformation for hours, but she also saw some of his movements and tried on her own to replicate some stances and hits. It wasn't formal, teacher-student training, but she believed it was useful in the end, even if the man was beyond frustrating to be around. Do you think he will become a Super Saiyan too? Gohan was somewhat worried about the prospect. Trunks looked at the boy, then at his father, but his father was the one who answered. Of course he'll get there. I can't wait to face him again. And he said so with trembling enthusiasm. But Dad, he wants to kill you. Gohan wasn't happy with how excited his father was at the prospect. Then I gotta be stronger and keep training. Trunks observed and listened to the exchange with a certain attention. Her mother told her what she knew and what she understood of her close friend, but she wasn't a fighter nor a martial artist, so she couldn't explain to her daughter some fundamental aspects of his personality. Her Gohan rarely talked of his father. Stupid Saiyan genes, the teenager concluded with a smirk. They landed by the mountains, and the radar indicated down, so down the snowy pine forest they went, and zoomed on the radar for a more precise location. Like they did for the previous ball, they separated and started looking, but the snow and absence of night light was a bother. The three eventually agreed to melt the snow by expanding their ki, and this time, it was Trunks who saw the flicker of light stuck between two branches. She flew up to grab it and exclaimed, "Found it." To the other two so they didn't need to keep looking. Summoning the dragon in the middle of the night had a certain ambiance to it. The middle of the forest wouldn't do, so they relocated further south to grassy plains instead. All balls were placed on the grass, and Trunks counted them, just in case. The orbs glowed in the dark, pulsing gently. The three Saiyans stepped away, Trunks putting back the dragon radar in the messenger bag. Goku asked if the teenager knew the phrase, and Trunks said it looking at the spheres with intense anticipation. The stars disappeared and thunder roared, wind blew, and lighting struck the wishing orbs, out of which came out the giant, somewhat snake-like dragon. The three watched in awe as Shenron's shape twisted out of the spheres. Goku because it was always an amazing experience and he never grew tired of it. Gohan because it was the first time he saw Earth's dragon. Trunks because it was a tangible chance at fixing her world for good. The eternal dragon's shape formed and its head looked down at the three creatures, whiskers waving, large pointy teeth, immense claws. I am the eternal dragon, state your wish and I shall grant it. The dragon roared. Trunks was quick on her feet. Eternal dragon, two monsters plague my world, they've killed many. I wish you to revive all the good people that died because of those cyborgs. Trunks and her mother had discussed the wishes Trunks could make if the opportunity came to gather the dragon balls. They both knew asking the dragon to kill the two androids wouldn't work. They also both knew that words mattered. Not everyone died because of the cyborgs, some were collateral casualties. The sun stayed back, letting the teenager state the wish. The dragon's eyes glowed red an instant, in silence. That is beyond my power. Trunks closed her fists in anger. Of course wish A wouldn't work. Why? Gohan asked, genuine interest and sadness in his voice. That universe is beyond my reach. State your wish. In multiverse theory it is. Damn it. Wish B. Wish B to E were out too. Wish F. Trunks quickly reached in her pockets for her capsule case to find an unlabeled capsule, which she pressed and dropped to the side. The time machine. She ran to it, and opened a clap underneath, to pull out something akin to a large cylinder containing some sort of liquid, a little over half full. She held it to the dragon. I wish for this machine to never run out of fuel. That is beyond my power. That universe is beyond my reach. Hurry and state your wish. Trunks lowered her arm, and glanced at the other two. The almighty dragon wasn't omnipotent after all. Wish G. There's a plant in this world that grows senzu beans. I wish for a sprout that will not wither and that can grow in my world. The plant had died a while ago in her world. It was something Gohan had lamented when he lost his arm. A simple matter. The dragon's eyes glowed again. A tiny sprout appeared floating in front of Trunks. She reached with her left hand to take it and observe it. A couple of leaves and some roots. Your wish has been granted. Farewell. The dragon rose with the dragon balls in the air, and dispersed with thunder. The skies cleared, revealing the night stars once more. Trunks's eyes kept staring at the sky where the eternal dragon had been moments ago, holding both the result of her wish and the cylinder containing the fuel for the time machine. The wish granted wasn't her first choice, nor the second choice, but at least it was in the top 10. Who could have guessed the dragon couldn't grant wishes affecting things from another universe? Or that she was indeed from a different universe? The implications were maddening, but they didn't matter at the moment. Would she actually go back to her own universe? That was more worrying. But she wouldn't know until she tried. Not the best outcome. Goku gave a friendly pat on her shoulder, a way of conveying sympathy. Gohan's attention went to the yellow, shining, egg-on-legs-shaped machine and he walked to it, curious. I would have preferred to have my mentor back, but this will save many lives. Her eyes went back to Gohan that was walking around with an expression of wonder. The boy liked science, and this was so sciencey. The time traveler walked to her vehicle to slide the cylinder back in place. A time machine. It's so pretty. Gohan admired it, but didn't touch it, and even hovered to look inside. Goku approached as well. Well, it's both a time and universe machine it seems, Trunks said as she locked the fuel hatch, and put her hand on the little graffiti written by her mother. Hope meant everything for their world. Capsule Corp. Goku read out loud on the turbines. Yes, my mother used capsule technology for the engine. It made sense to keep the brand, I guess. Her mother was still attached to the brand for a reason Trunks didn't want to ask about. The prowess couldn't have been made without the company's existence. It has so many buttons and levers. Gohan observed from the glass-like dome. Trunks let him go about and marvel at the object. He seemed respectful enough to not touch it, so she was happy with letting the little boy be a child. Sun-san. Goku looked expectant when called, and Trunks took the dragon radar out of the messenger bag with her right hand, the other still holding the precious senzu plant. Would it be too much to ask to give this back to Bulma-san? Goku accepted without hesitation, and the teenager gave him back the precious invention. Please let her know I am grateful for everything. Sure thing, Tora. If I am still alive by the time it's done recharging, I will see you in about 30 months. The two shook hands, and Gohan landed back close to his father. Tora put a knee on the ground to be at his height like they first met, and held a hand to shake his hand as well. The boy took it. Gohan-san, take care of yourself. Please live, Tora-san, the boy half pleaded and squeezed her hand. Trunks' smile reached her eyes. She couldn't promise it, her world wasn't as forgiving, but she squeezed back, silently promising she'd at least try. The father and son saw the teenager settle in the pit and do what they could guess was preparation work. They moved back when the machine began something similar to ignition. They saw Trunks check her watch a couple of times, the machine slowly took off, and after a last goodbye wave by its pilot, she and her ride suddenly disappeared. Only to reappear at the same exact location, in another time and universe, as it seemed. It was the middle of the afternoon. Trunks landed, exited the vehicle, capsuled it, and flew straight home with the plant hidden under her windbreaker. A month in the past had cleared her biology of the dulling effects of tobacco, and there was a dreadful moment of regret when she arrived in her version of West City and her nose picked up the smell she had grown to hate. No matter, she'd smoke once at home. She touched ground close to the ruined version of the Capsule Corp compound and quickly walked through the hidden passages to make it downstairs, announcing her presence to the familiar presence she felt. She put the little sprout on one of the many boxes on the stairs. She'll take care of it later. Mother. Bulma jumped out of her soldering station when called, turned off the iron, spat out her cigarette and jumped towards her daughter. Trunks happily opened her arms to accept the hug, and held her mother close, hiding her face in the crook of her neck, tangling her fingers in her mother's loose braid. She'd kept physical contact to a minimum for the past month, she missed it and it showed. She inhaled the familiar scent of tobacco, coffee, and old oil stains she always associated with the only remaining loved one in her life. She held on tight, with more strength than she actually wanted to give, but her mother didn't complain about the force. Trunks felt hands slide under her windbreaker and shirt, and happily accepted the soft touch on her back. It took her a while to finally be able to let go, and let poor Bulma breathe comfortably. After getting some fresh coffee, a cigarette each and removing the sword, bag and windbreaker, as well as the binder underneath her shirt, Trunks started to explain the events while they both sat on the lab's couch bed. The radio was off, for once. In order of importance. Mission success. I stayed an extra 22 days to be able to use the Dragon Balls. The dragon couldn't do anything concerning our world, he said it was another universe. So multiverse theory sucks. On the plus side, I made a machine that travels through time and alternate realities. I'll prepare my prize acceptance speech in the morning. No one but Bulma Brief could have done it, she praised her mother further with a smirk. How long was I gone for you? About 2 hours. That was a relief. The return procedure more or less worked as intended. Trunks took a good dose of sweet nicotine, then blew the smoke. Shenron couldn't do anything to the time machine either, and I guess it wouldn't have been able to do anything to me because, well, other universe. So instead I ended up wishing for a senzu sprout. I'll plant it in the portable greenhouse. The old engineer agreed this was useful, less time recovering and less potential sequelae. Trunks paused a moment to drink some coffee, tap off some ashes, and continued. Past you thought about using the Dragon Balls to find out who the scientist was to deal with the problem preemptively. Let me guess. Vegeta told me to off with that weakling mentality and Sun Kun agreed he wanted to fight them. Bulma knew and felt sorry for her past self. Stupid Saiyan genes, Trunks started and Bulma said the same phrase at the same time. Bulma continued on. Told you so. Yes, I got it. Sun San's survival and the extra motivation will hopefully be enough to change things. She took in another dose of caffeine. I was 54 hours early from Sun San's arrival, too, but Frieza was also early by about 3 hours. Had to do that. Felt pretty good to be on the overpowering side for once. Ah, she pulled the bag from the ground, and opened it to take out the capsule case the past Bulma had sneaked into it for her. She handed it to her mother. A gift from you, to you. Bulma put down her mug, stuck her cigarette in her mouth and used both hands to open it and check it out. She mulled over the idea of how to thank herself, her other self. This is going to be incredibly useful, she whispered. So, Sun San knows Vegeta San is my father, but that's it. I stayed about 10 days with him and a couple of weeks with past you. You managed to burn toast, by the way, She promised herself she'd roast her mother in lieu of her past version, and gave her a little nudge to tease, and her mother grumbled about not being able to be a genius in everything, moved forward to the ashtray on the coffee table, and tapped her ashes off. Your mother called me Tora-chan. She shuddered at the memory. Her mother chuckled, but past you and everyone else used male language about me. Vegeta-san still tried to kill me though. She put her head on her mother's shoulder and was embraced in return, gently rubbing the shoulder as a gesture to reassure, the same gesture her past self had done the first night at Capsule Corp. So that was interesting. Her mind went back to what she'd learned about her father, and the GR logs, and she shot up and grabbed her capsule case in a hurry to take the computer out. I got access to the servers. I took everything. Bulma promptly stubbed out her cigarette and grabbed the computer from her daughter, eyes shining. You think we can charge the machine faster with this? Haven't seen these in 20 years, Trunks see, Bulma half scolded her impatient daughter. Give a few hours and a caffeine offering worthy of this triple PhD genius who just confirmed theoretical physics is plain physics and we'll see. The older genius had turned on the computer and started to browse the files already. Trunks snickered at the request and went on to grab a stray cable to connect it to the computer so it wouldn't lose power, and grab the coffee maker to prepare a new batch. She let her mother work and got to work on planting the senzu sprout, unpacking her things, and placing the time machine back where her mother had first built it, so it was ready to be recharged once the genius had found what she needed from the data. With the extra equipment, and most importantly, with access to her past research, documentation and schematics, the woman who invented time and universe travel had managed to recharge the tank of her masterpiece in half the time it originally took. It wasn't an exact science, and it would be only the second time it'd be tested, but the genius had been confident enough in her ability to actually bet her daughter's life that it'd work on the first try. And work it did, because she was Bulma brief. 4 months was long enough for Trunks to return to some of her old routines, with the addition of delivering some of past Bulma's supplies to other survivors. Reconstruction wasn't on the immediate to-do list, not while the looming threat still existed, but a little comfort was necessary to keep the flicker of hope alive in the different undergrounds. As long as each had enough resources and each group was separated enough, the militias more or less kept to themselves, and sometimes even cooperated through trade or the radio, for the time being. Bulma had chosen to remain in the underground floors of her house, instead of moving into larger, more communal places. Too many questions about Trunks and Gohan, otherwise, and she needed to be able to work without interruption. People knew about the Golden Warrior who had stalled many times the cyborgs. They didn't know there were two, let alone their identity. Some things did change since Trunks' return. Bulma had prepared her daughter mentally for just about anything, trying to keep her hopes about her father low, the importance of her identity being secret except maybe from Goku, until she was born, at least to manage the potential jealousy and unfairness feelings that would plague her mind while comparing the two eras, but she didn't prepare her for how to deal with missing her mom. It just didn't cross her mind. The kid was independent, forced to mature quickly in their dire circumstances. Her mother and Gohan were still her only friends and family. She learned young to stay reserved, occupy herself and not bother her mother's important work. The woman had no time to be really motherly, so the child bottled up her anger, need and confusion, only releasing it whenever she could manage to convince Gohan to spar with her, to train her. Once she started to understand what the genius was doing, she put great effort into entering her world, helping whenever possible, and it took Gohan's death for Trunks to finally let go of her resentment and understand Bulma's love language, work. Trunks never mentioned how hard it was being around her past self and not being able to be touchy as usual, and overall acted well adjusted, but the teen's actions still changed enough for her overworked mother to notice. The girl became much more clingy than usual. Sure, they were close, but since her return, she would almost follow her to the bathroom. Touch starvation was real. Asking what was wrong never worked. She had Vegeta's blood and intense gaze, and her desperate hold of her when she returned gave her enough answers. The pair had often slept together during the few rare times they napped at the same time, but since her return, when Bulma slept, Trunks laid against her and held her, and when Trunks slept, either she forced her mother to hold her, or just dozed against her back, shoulder or on her lap while she worked. Fighting off a Saiyan's grip was pointless, so Bulma just accepted it. Proper lengthy rest had been lost to both of them for the better part of the decade, so the sleep pattern they both had wasn't affected. Trunks had confided she slept just about the same in the past, sporadic naps. Bulma knew it would take a while once peace was obtained for her child, and herself, to return to healthier routines. The senzu sprout grew slowly, and Trunks didn't know what the plant was supposed to be like, but one morning she saw a tiny bean, so she was reassured the wish had worked. She had to reluctantly promise she wouldn't go after the cyborgs until at least one bean was fully grown. Bulma resented the plant, in a way, as its maturation meant the teen would rush to battle again. After Gohan's death, Bulma had tried to force her to stay and not face them again, but the hot-blooded kid never listened, and the painful days-long bed rests over the past few years hadn't deterred the teenager from trying again. She inherited both her parents' stubbornness. Truth was Trunks hated every confrontation, but she didn't value her own life all that much, at least not more than any other survivors. And unlike them, she could take a beating and have a decent chance at survival, and if a few muscle tears and broken bones could save people, then Trunks was eager to accept the trade. Prior to her trip to the past, she kept the radio on at all times, and rushed at every possible instance of cyborg strikes, like Gohan used to. The monsters couldn't be sensed, so evacuation orders were the only way to find out where they were. Arguably she'd become more cautious since her trip to the past. The first time the cyborgs struck when she was back, she focused on quickly clearing the blocked entrances to the undergrounds and the roads, then provoked the cyborgs playing cat and mouse in the broken buildings. Guerrilla tactics, in a way. She technically didn't break her promise to not go after them, but she came home with a couple of broken ribs. Trunks' body, like Vegeta's and Goku's, had the ability to heal superficial wounds easily, so that test against the killing machines had taken her less than a week of taking it easy to fully recover from. The cyborgs' strike schedule was absolutely unpredictable. They'd sometimes spend a couple of years without a peep, then obliterate 3 towns in a week. They traveled a lot, and sometimes came back to a place they'd destroyed either a few months or a few years prior, just to cause more despair and hopelessness. And they loved the terror that inflicted. Once the first bean was mature, at least comparing it to the 2 she'd eaten after sparring with Goku in the past, Trunks kept closer to the radio than usual. Part of her felt guilty to wish they'd actually attack, but part of her also wanted to face them. She even kept it on when her mother cut her hair. It had reached that annoying, too short to tie, too long to not get in the way, length. Bulma shaved the sides and trimmed short enough so it wouldn't get in her eyes. She was no hairdresser, but Trunks didn't care as long as it was functional. She did her daughter a middle part to check for basic symmetry. The machine had finished charging without any news from the cyborgs, and Bulma was relieved. Even if her daughter was going to fight in the past, she wouldn't be alone, and the gang had a little under 3 years to prepare for the menace. Surely things would turn out well. And yet, this time's farewells were more worrying for Bulma. She knew she was sending her teenager to war. Time and universe travel was still not a tested science. Trunks arrived on the intended day, but she was at least an hour off according to her watch. She was late. The larger town she'd indicated as first impact was already devastated, but not in full. Clearly something interrupted the cyborgs, and they took the fight elsewhere. She focused on her senses, trying to find larger energies, finding it hard to fight the dread that it was already over and that the cyborgs had won. And she found Gohan's, way up north. So she rushed to him, and as she flew in that direction, she started feeling a larger key even further north. She'd have to investigate. But Gohan first. The boy was flying slowly, and the closer he got, the more kiss she felt. A group further north, and Gohan with 3 smaller ones. Once she could see him, she understood he was carrying people, and his direction was West City, which she had already passed. They met mid-air, and Trunks immediately noticed who the boy was carrying, her mother with a little baby, and another armed man with a round face she didn't know. At least she was born. Bulma exclaimed her name, and she looked back at her in recognition. As expected of the genius, she put things together. That or Goku spilled the beans. Trunks never mentioned her mother being Bulma 4 months ago. Or rather 3 years ago. An energy spike caught her attention north, she frowned, then looked back at the group with a questioning look. Gohan-kun is flying me home. My plane was destroyed by Dr. Gero, Bulma explained. Gero. Trunks indicated down, and they landed, and while she reached for her capsule case, Gohan relaxed a little about not having to balance comfortably Yajirobe, Bulma and the baby, and looked happy to see her friend again. There was a lot of catching up to do. She couldn't take her eyes out of herself. Bulma walked away to change her baby, grabbing Yajirobe to use his scarf as her baby's stash was in her destroyed vehicle. Report, please, Gohan-san, she asked with worry. Yes sir. Gohan quickly responded, and more or less tried to organize the information needed for the time traveler to seize the situation. So we went where you told us, and we couldn't sense the androids, and they stole Dad's energy with their creepy hand things, and he just came down with the symptoms of the illness, so Yamcha-san took him home to take the medication. Vegeta-san dismantled the first one, kinda sorta saving my dad in the process. The other one, the old one, ran away. We chased him but he absorbed a lot of Piccolo-san's energy, and he attacked Bulma-san's plane to distract us. Trunks didn't need to ask whether Bulma and the baby were fine, but there was still a worry about the woman putting herself in harm's way like that. Bulma-san told us that the old guy was Dr. Gero, the scientist who created the cyborgs, so he became a robot himself somehow. And everyone else went to find his lab near North City. While listening, Trunks threw a capsule to the side, her green and white flying car. She'd tell the others to fly to Capsule Corp once baby Trunks was changed and cleaned. The key fluctuations further north weren't lost on either Half Saiyan, and the story profoundly bothered Trunks. This can't be right. The cyborgs are enhanced humans, not androids, and they don't steal energy because they have an infinite supply. Moreover, 17 and 18 look my age, old guy. Robot. The one Vegeta-san destroyed was a robot. They called each other 19 and 20, Gohan remembered. And Sun-san just got sick right now. We saved the medicine but never used it, because you said, when the symptoms started, the boy was worried, perhaps they'd made a mistake about the treatment, but Trunks reassured it was what needed to be done. The teenager didn't know how much her intervention changed things. Surely they should have opted for the safer route, but fighters wanting a good challenge be damned. Bulma-san, take my car and go, she indicated when the mother and baby came back, a little hasty. There's a chance 17 and 18 weren't activated. I need to go and destroy them before that happens. And to hell with everyone's desire to fight. The spikes of energy she felt weren't a good sign, and she prayed that it was the battle with Dr. Gero and not the other two. Bulma agreed, and handed baby Trunks to Yajirobe so she could start the vehicle and adjust the seat so she could properly pilot it. The controls weren't hard to adjust to, even if that model was clearly modified. The baby wasn't happy about being apart from her mother and pouted. Vegeta's scowl was inherited for sure. Vegeta-sans and Bulma-sans baby Gohan had followed where Trunks was looking, but the time traveler didn't hear it. Goku was out of commission, but not dead. Bulma, Gohan, the baby. The three original survivors. With Goku alive, perhaps they'd fare better even if the rest falls. Gohan-san, go with them, she said, keeping her eyes on her past self, and darted off to the direction of the fight she'd been feeling over the past few minutes. Perhaps she'd be able to change things there, and if not, then Goku would surely find a solution. Gohan must survive no matter what. Trunks recognized the energy as being Vegeta's once she got closer, and there was a hint of pride and relief sensing it was a Super Saiyan type of energy. Unable to sense another energy fighting, she hoped it was Gero, but her hopes came crashing down when she heard 18's laugh. Her eyes darted, looking for the pair desperately, and saw Tenshinhan, Piccolo and Krillin. 17 was near-ish, talking to the Earthlings. 18 was fighting Vegeta further on the mountain road. And there was another. A tall bulky man with red spikes. And the red ribbon logo on his green armor. Who's that? Vegeta was holding well against 18, from the looks of it, as long as 17 didn't intervene. He's gotten really strong, I'm glad. Trunks landed by Piccolo, Tenshinhan and Krillin, who had all looked up when they felt her. She kept her eyes on 17, who was a dozen meters away on the road, and the red-haired giant who was even further back. Trunks. Krillin half noted, half asked, and Trunks briefly acknowledged. Excuse my tardiness. Gohan-san filled me in. Are those the right ones? We fought two others. Piccolo didn't take his eyes off Vegeta and 18. 18 is the blonde one, 17 is the one with the black hair. I don't know that one. Hey there, Lilac. Told your friends earlier, but if you intervene, I intervene, 17 repeated the warning he'd given the three others a couple of minutes before. Trunks looked straight back at the cyborg, tense. 17 not ganging up on Vegeta with 18 like that was strange. But from his speech pattern, his posture, his smug smirk and the stupid nickname, it was the same. The message was heard, but Trunks didn't give it a proper response, just an intense, hateful stare. That's 16, it seems, Tenshinhan stated. That broke Trunks' fixation on 17 and she looked back at Tenshinhan with disbelief. A third one. Or rather, a fifth one. Trunks loathed unknown variables with a passion. She had tried to sense him, but he had no key either. No. She needed to calm down and analyze the situation. On the plus side, Goku got sick much later than in her timeline, and would survive with the medicine, and Vegeta was holding his own against 18. On the downside, there's another enemy. Gero. She had to ask the three-eyed man. 17 killed him, at least that was reassuring. Gero being a cyborg didn't change that event. Or perhaps he was one too and they just never found out in her own timeline. Vegeta threw 18 up against the cliff of the mountain road, and they both ended up landing on what was left of the road. The Saiyan Prince had heard 17 warning the others to not intervene. I'd rather die than rely on Kakarot's cowards or that brat. Vegeta spat out. I'll kill her and then you, washing machine. And you weaklings stay out of my way. 18 chuckled. 17 applauded. 16 did nothing. Vegeta and 18 went on to round 2, and the Z fighters observed. Trunks felt something wrong in Vegeta's Super Saiyan's energy. It didn't feel like Gohan's, or Goku's. Or her own, in a sense. Trunks considered her options. Her fists turned white. If they ganged up on 18 while she held 17 off, perhaps they could do something, but uncertainty of 16's presence bothered her. Vegeta slammed 18 down, then with his palm, he charged a powerful ki blast down the rubble where she'd landed. She stood back up and threw her jacket away, her clothes damaged, but herself completely unscathed. He landed by her but Trunks didn't hear their exchange. Something she said must have made him furious because he viciously attacked her. She fought back just as well, but some blows landed on both sides. Trunks gathered Vegeta was at least as strong as her now, and matching 18 was a feat she believed she would be able to do herself if 17 didn't always get involved. But the other factor of the battle wasn't lost on her, nor on Piccolo. Vegeta's going to get himself killed. Piccolo noticed with a growl. He's losing energy, but she isn't. We need to retreat and go in together with Sun San, she whispered. She needed a plan, fast, to get Vegeta out of there, but Vegeta was not the kind to retreat or abandon. Putting him out of commission, without killing him, and without letting the cyborgs kill either of them was a three-way fight that required far more preparation time than she had. 18's sudden kick broke Vegeta's left arm and his howl of pain echoed on the mountains. Every strategy, caution, and common sense Trunks had tried to come up with shattered with her father's bone. Rage overtook her, the Super Saiyan form taking her as she threw the biggest blast she could in 17's direction, hoping to distract him and raise enough dust for him to be blinded, and launched herself, sword in hand at 18. She completely forgot about 16's existence, her muscle memory going after the two enemies she knew. The blonde's forearm stopped the blade and broke its edge. Her 18 had always dodged her sword. Trunks realized they must have been holding back all along, but next thing she felt was a mother of all punches on the back of her head, slamming her down on the ground. 17 was fast. She closed her fists on the dust and rock, forced to take a second to recover from the sudden hit. Piccolo and Tenshinhan jumped on 17, who basically kicked them out of the way, and Trunks was able to get back on her feet, blood in her field of vision, her scalp bleeding. What she saw was that Vegeta had launched himself at 17, but 18 had stopped him by grabbing his foot, and spun him to throw him back at Trunks. She managed to brace herself to soak the incoming Saiyan cannon bullet, and soften his fall. His arm looked like it was in a painful angle. She let him go when the momentum ended, and launched herself back at 18 with a desperate battle cry. She didn't register Tenshinhan being locked in a chokehold by 17. She sent 18 off flying with a kick, and went after her. The blonde cyborg stopped herself, putting her feet on the vertical surface of cliff, and blocked the following punch and closed her fingers on the fist, holding the teenager in place. 18's feet sank on the rocks, but her body didn't flinch. Strange. I have no data on you. You can go blonde like Vegeta, what's that about? Trunks' answer was her left fist on her enemy's stomach, but she also grabbed it. She now had both of her hands secured. The cyborg's blue eyes studied the other's teal ones. Trunks pulled her hands down suddenly, figuring she'd not let go and using gravity to her advantage, all while launching her knee up in the open guard, catching 18's chin. That broke the lock and sent 18 further above her, and before she could follow up with another attack, Trunks saw the cyborg avoid an incoming blast. Vegeta never gives up. 17 phased in front of Trunks and landed a frontal flat kick to her sternum, sending her back down against rubble. The transformation wore off, and she struggled to keep conscious, the front of her binder shattered, and if her breathing was any indication, she guessed something punctured her lung underneath. Sternum was surely broken too. She expected 17 to follow up, but he didn't. A few minutes later, Krillin arrived near her and gave her a senzu bean, and offered a hand to help her up. She took it hesitant, then wiped the blood off her face. The binder was broken, but it more or less held in place under the black tea and the straps. Not that it mattered anyway, since she was born now, she'd only put it on as part of her fighting gear and didn't really intend to hide her gender anymore. She saw the monk tend to the others, giving a bean to Tenshinhan, Piccolo, and finally Vegeta, who stayed afar. Everyone surviving was good news, all in all. What do you mean? They knew about the senzu. Why didn't they kill us then? Tenshinhan asked. They said it was kind of fun to fight us, and to find them after getting stronger. They just want to kill Goku, it's just a game to them. Sorry I didn't fight. PFF'd you couldn't have done anything. 17 took Trunks out in basically one blow, and he was a Super Saiyan, Piccolo reassured and berated Krillin at the same time. Trunks knelt by her discarded sword and took a good look at the shattered edge. Were her versions of 18 and 17 that strong too? No, Gohan could match 17 when he was serious, and she was now stronger than Gohan was back then. Trunks knew 18 held back against Vegeta just from the state of her sword. It was kind of fun to fight us sounded like what 17 and 18 had in her time with her and Gohan, at the beginning, when they were weaker, but this never applied to the initial fighters, as they were killed on day one, more or less. Wait. Were not worth killing. Geez, Trunks jumping on like that, you're truly Vegeta's son. All bravado and no brain, those Saiyans, Tenshinhan commented back. So they've not met baby me. But they do know my actual name. They're incredibly strong, and I don't think Son's as strong as Vegeta and Trunks are right now. Piccolo mulled things over. Trunks sheathed her sword, and finally managed to put together a coherent analysis. They're stronger. She put a hand over her jacket's pocket. Good, the capsule case was intact. They're stronger than the ones from my world. The possible alternative that her own versions of 17 and 18 were holding back that much didn't sit well. She missed the abject horrified look Tenshinhan and Krillin gave her at the information. Vegeta blasted off without warning and without a word, and Trunks started walking to take off after him, but Tenshinhan put a hand on her shoulder to stop her. Leave him be. He was all pride and confidence since he managed to become a Super Saiyan. Getting beaten by a girl ruffled his ego. Trunks would have laughed if the situation hadn't been so dire. Her mother clearly had been right about her not letting Vegeta know she was a girl before he could transform. She accepted letting her father go for the time being. Piccolo, who had remained silent and pondering the strength of the 2-3 menaces, blasted off without warning either. We need to move Goku. His house is probably the first place they'll go. Tenshinhan noted. What about those two? Where did they go? Trunks had to ask. Ah, Piccolo's just like Vegeta and Goku, they want to get stronger. That way, Krillin said while pointing in the direction where Piccolo flew off, as Kami-sama's lookout. Piccolo and he used to be the same person, so perhaps by fusing back together, the monk continued with a brief explanation on his encounter with Guru on Namek and how Piccolo Daimao and Kami used to be the same person, and Piccolo would have been much stronger on Namek if he had been whole. As for your father, I don't think he's the kind to give up. Too much pride to even consider defeat. He'll lick his wounds and come back with new techniques to defeat them, Tenshinhan added. Trunks nodded to show she'd heard, and somewhat agreed. Vegeta hadn't gone in the direction of West City, so she figured he'd rather be alone than be at Capsule Corp. She'll have to find him later. Trunks. To Ra and Kusu, EH. As they lifted off to read the Sun household and move Goku to another, safer location, Krillin asked for the final, definite confirmation about Trunks' identity. The teenager nodded slowly with a meek smile. Mother's family likes to have a certain theme with names, and father never signed the papers, so mother and I decided to use the symbol I usually sign with instead of my name. My apologies for hiding that from you. No need to apologize, Tenshinhan added. Both him and Krillin knew the teenager did it to still have a chance at being born in that era. Vegeta's the only one who doesn't know. We saw Bulma on that island with the baby. That's when we put 2 and 2 together. Same eyes, figures, Krillin added. Trunks wondered whether he was talking about her eye color, Bulma's, or her eye shape, Vegeta's. She also doubted Vegeta hadn't put 2 and 2 together, unless he'd not seen the baby, which was quite the possibility. The cure? How long until Goku's at full health? Those who got it in my world have compromised immune systems in less than ideal recovery circumstances. And they aren't aliens. Trunks had little reliable data, beyond the protocols established before society fell apart. Excluding Saiyan oddities, perhaps between a week and a month. We'll need to stall them for that long then, Krillin wasn't optimistic. But they can't sense energy and they're taking their time. That gave them time, but Trunks felt sorry for the cities that would be on their path. At least they had Dragon Balls. Tenshinhan left off in another direction after stating he'd be going back to Chaozu. Krillin mentioned their destination would be Roshi's house, and Krillin and Trunks hurried back to Mount Paozu. The teenager wasn't sure whether history had changed for the best. These cyborgs were 3, even if 16 didn't fight, and they were stronger, that are the ones in her time were holding back a lot, but considering how much Gohan, and then she, could give them trouble even when they were serious, she doubted it. Especially 18, who was careful to avoid Trunks' sword, or disarm her. That, and it seemed Bulma hadn't mentioned her child as being her baby girl. Or everyone was just that oblivious, which was also a possibility considering the stories she heard from Bulma about Goku's need to touch genitals to know whether someone was a girl or not. Once at Mount Paozu, before they knocked, Krillin ventured a hard subject with the time traveler. The cyborgs haven't killed anyone, yet. Yet, Trunks repeated with a raised eyebrow. It would be nice if. Are they really that evil? In my world, the two of them reduce the world's population to less than the entire population of West City, and take glee in maintaining the rest of us in terror and hopelessness, Trunks said coolly, staring ahead. Right, sorry. They knocked and were greeted by Chi-Chi. Trunks checked on Goku's sleeping state, and confirmed the medicine was working as intended, at least according to what she knew of the treatment. Trunks had never exactly been on nurse duty. Krillin explained to Yamcha, Chi-Chi and Gohan, freshly returning from Capsule Corp, that the cyborgs were after Goku and that moving to Roshi's island was a way to stall them. Krillin also filled Yamcha on how they were different cyborgs than the android and Dr. Gero they fought while Trunks carried the futon to the capsule vehicle, a mix between a helicopter and a plane. Yamcha piloted the vehicle while Chi-Chi tended to her husband. Trunks sat against one of the walls, legs crossed, sword on her lap. The adrenaline wearing off had made her aware of how uncomfortable the broken binder was, but she couldn't just take it off right there. She'd have to bear with it and wait. She'd waited for hours with broken bones, she could manage the mild discomfort. Everyone had kept using male language about her, all while acknowledging she was the same baby, so she wanted to see for herself first. Gohan sat next to her left side and started some homework. To keep his mother out of his hair, 3 years with minimal schooling didn't sit well with Chi-Chi's desire to see her son become a great scholar one day. He also wanted to keep his mind busy with something else as his father was asleep and sick. Trunks accepted the nearby presence. Gohan had always kept her grounded when she was his age. She'd return the kindness and when necessary, help him work through some questions, at least the odd one that Gohan didn't get, but Trunks did get. Yamcha and Krillin eventually had to discuss potential plans. So, what can we do? The former bandit asked while piloting. Trunks, if I give you Gero's lab's coordinates, could you go back in time and destroy it before they're activated? Trunks pondered. How far into the technicalities she could go about the system she had a hard time understanding herself. It is in the realm of feasibility, and it would work, but it wouldn't work for this world. Krillin's blank stare said it all. Trunks shook her head slightly. Gohan-san, may I borrow something to write on? Gohan gladly grabbed an empty sketchbook and pencils and got closer under the teenager's left arm to see. Trunks, being right-handed, welcomed him. Krillin also approached to follow along. Trunks opened the sketchbook and set it on the sheath of her sword for support, and drew a horizontal pencil line with an arrow at the bottom of the landscape paper. This is time, in my world. She put some dates on the line. August 764, November 766, December 766, May 767. This is the cyborgs first appeared. Today. When you guys fought and died, she started to explain and indicated May 767, and moved back to December. This is when Sun San died. I believe he fell ill a few weeks prior. Right about here, She indicated November, which is also when I was born. As for August 764, this was Sun San's return from space, and coincidentally, his disposal of Frieza. She moved back towards the right, and put in 3 other dates. February 780, September 783 and January 784. She let the pencil linger a moment on the first date, and ended up scribbling on it to discard it, before going to September 783. This was when I left for the first time, and when I returned as well. And this is when I left the second time this time, she added when indicating the last date. When I return home, regardless of how long I stay, I will come back to January 784. If the return procedure works the same as it did the first time. However, in this world, this changed. She went back and tapped August 764, and drew another horizontal line, above the first one. She added August 764 to that new line. I arrived here, about 55 hours before Sun San. Frieza's ship arrived about 3 hours earlier than Sun San. Frieza's time of death should have been 3 hours later. This is how you knew Goku's ETA. Krillin noted and indicated the other August 764. Trunks confirmed the veracity of the comment with a smile. That is right. It is because Mother remembered the day and hour that battle happened, so I was given that detail. I also stayed a month afterwards. She marked September 764 on that new timeline. She then used green to write an arrow going from September 783 to August 764, then another arrow from September 764 to September 783. The return procedure had me return at more or less the same time as I left. She then added November 766 and May 767 to this new timeline, still aligned with the one below. This is when I was born in this world, and this is today. My May 767 is different from yours, because in yours, Sun San got sick now and not last November. He is alive, you are alive, there are 3 cyborgs instead of the 2 I know, and they're stronger. As for 19 and 20, perhaps they existed in my world, but I do know 17 killed the scientist in my world too. She never knew the name of Dr. Jero, but she'd picked up that information during one of her encounters with the cyborgs. They were chatty, sometimes. Sun San remained dead in my world, despite him being alive now. This is why me going back to an earlier time would only probably create another line that does not affect yours, as much as this line and the changes of caused have not affect mine. Let alone the fact that she's unsure whether she'd be able to go back further in time, and then get home. She'd need to return home first, then do a 3rd trip. And then, what? If she traveled to 767 again, would she land in this world, or the world she'd previously destroyed the lab? She drew in red another arrow, from January 784 to May 767, to indicate her 2nd trip. What were the implications of crossing those green and red lines she drew, if she traveled further back than what she was at now? So why come back to begin with, if it doesn't affect your world? Yamcha, piloting, didn't get all of the details, but he understood whatever the teenager had done served did not affect that other world. Well, we thought it could possibly affect our world, but the other reason was that Mother wanted to know a time existed where the menace would be dealt with, even if ours was doomed. As for me, I wanted to fight alongside Sun San and Vegeta San, learn and see if we perhaps could find their weakness. Mother also considered asking Sun San to use my machine's return procedure, so he could fight them in our world, then send him back so I could return, as a last resort. Gohan looked intensely at the new sketch on his book, and pointed at the different gaps between the green arrows on both timelines. You are free to choose years and dates. Well, it's not exact science. I was early the first time, I was late this time. But otherwise, yes. 2.5 years have passed for you, but only 4 months have passed for me, the time necessary to recharge the machine. She was still unsure about what could happen if she went back to an earlier time than her first trip. So you're 17 years old now. The boy commented and indicated the birth month on the bottom timeline, November 766, then January 784. Thankx confirmed it. I am both 17 years old, and about 6 months old. She traced between her supposed birth on this timeline in May 767, and her birth in her own timeline in January 784. Gohan made an O sound. He got the gist of it. Wait, when did you say your birthday was? Chi-Chi interrupted. Something caught her attention. November 21st. Bulma's boy was born in June. Oh, Bulma's boy was born in June. Thankx looked up at Chi-Chi, speechless with the information. Then down at Gohan, who was basically snuggled up under her left arm, looking at the timeline scribbles with a whole lot of sciencey interest. Then at Krillin, and then Yamcha, who kept quiet about the child his ex-girlfriend had with the person who was more or less responsible for his death, and who was busy making sure the vehicle stayed on course. Well, I guess that is another change caused by my intrusion in your world. At least this one is not dire. Her words trembled. Her fingers tightened on the pencil. The date was somewhat important, because it implied many other things concerning the relationship between her parents, and Trunks' mind absolutely refused to go there. But Bulma would have not misled Chi-Chi with her baby's gender. This Trunks was male. No, wait, hold on. Did this Bulma amebed her female baby because she thought she was perhaps destined to be a boy? Should I add up? Trunks changed November 767 to June 767 on the This World line, replacing the current baby's birth month to the correct one, her hand less still than it was before. No wonder that baby had such a similar gaze to hers, that Trunks was almost a year old. She was always terrible at telling kids' ages, so between a 6-month-old and an 11-month-old one she only saw afar. Hold on, was I supposed to be male? Am I? No. The dragon said she came from another universe, and only the time machine linked the two worlds. This was a headache. She questioned her medical history. This Trunks and she were different people, but she'd need to clear that up with this world's Bulma so she does not impose the perceived maleness of Trunks, but from the future, on that baby's education, if she was indeed a baby girl. Regardless of the changes, thanks to you, Goku-sa's alive, so I'm really thankful, Chi-Chi added, unknowingly pulling Trunks out of her inner turmoil, putting her hand on her husband's forehead. Trunks gave her a kind smile. That was the purpose of her mission, the main focus, regardless of this whole issue about herself and this world's version of her. She appreciated Chi-Chi's words even more than she could express. That's the most important thing. Hope lives, Trunks responded with a little more conviction. The shock wore off, she'd focus on that later. There were more pressing subjects at hand than whatever those questions were. Gohan had noticed the sudden change in the teenager when the information of Trunks' actual birth month came through. He was so close he could feel the teenager's heart pound, his muscle tense, his ki fluctuate. He cared about his new friend. He looked lonely and Gohan only wished to give him warmth and welcome. He'd saved his dad, after all, and he had killed Frieza before he could do them any harm. Tora was a hero, and the panic he could almost smell on the teenager. His heart sank for him. And he had no tools, no agency to help him. Gohan wanted to stay close, to learn more and to be able to be helpful. Even if he was just a child. Trunks gave back the pencils to the young boy, and started closing the sketchbook when a flash of yellow grabbed her attention. The sketchbook wasn't empty. Gohan had drawn something at the end of it, and she had a peek. A drawing of the time machine. She felt Gohan shift a little when he realized the teen may have seen his drawing, so she closed it to give it back, not commenting on it. Gohan, whichever version, kept her mind from wandering too far off into despair, and she put her left hand briefly on top of his head, hesitant, to indicate it was okay. Like her Gohan used to do with her as a child. Focus on what's important for this world, she told herself. Speaking of baby you, we should call Bulma and let her know what's up. Krillin, can you do it? Kinda piloting the plane here. Yamcha asked. Krillin was reluctant. He made a comment about how much an earful he'd get from your mother. That is how she is, even in my world, Trunks commented, uncomfortable. This Bulma wasn't her mother, but it was just too confusing even for herself to not think of her as such. Krillin pressed the numbers from the co-pilot seat, and asked to speak to Bulma when someone picked up, announcing his name, and Bulma's voice soon echoed on the speakers. Finally Krillin, is everyone okay? I tried calling everywhere. Gohan should have been home already. Yes. Krillin panicked, then breathed in and out. I'll explain, but we lost to the cyborgs. Gero managed to activate them. Senzu Beans saved our hide. They're searching for Goku, so we're moving him to Kame House. Piccolo's probably on Kami-sama's lookout. Vegeta's gone somewhere to vent. What about my handsome son from the future? Where is he? Trunks held a little yelp at the sudden compliment and was confused as to why Bulma was even asking for her. Right in here, he can hear you, Yamcha laughed. Is he? That's great. Bulma never lost a beat. So, we got a call from some farmer a good distance away from Jinger Town, and he'd found a strange vehicle. He couldn't take it because he didn't find a way to turn it into a capsule. We wanted to help, so we asked for the model type, but he said there was no number. You know we put numbers on all out creations, right? We told him it wasn't a capsule vehicle, but he insisted it was branded Capsule Corp without any serial, so we asked for a photo. Who knows, maybe it's a lost prototype or something, and I just got it. Trunks listened, unsure about how any of this was her business, but she knew better than to interrupt her mother. The woman needed to work through her thought process to explain her reasoning, and the relevance would eventually come. Krillin, however, did not know any better. And what's that got to do with anything? Bulma screeched. I'm getting there, you impudent imp. Gohan giggled a little, and Trunks had a hard time containing her. I knew it, smile. So where was I? Alright, your car. So I got the picture of the vehicle, and I saw your car, because I never saw this design before. You made it. No, you did. Trunks pinched the bridge of her nose a moment, and corrected. Mother designed it and created the engine. I followed her instructions to weld and manipulate the body work. Oh, I see, because Capsule Corp didn't do either your car nor this strange vehicle, and wondered if perhaps it was yours. The turbines are very similar. Can you have a look? I'm sending a fax to your helicopter model. While everyone in the helicopter waited for the machine to receive the data, Bulma continued. That a good car, by the way. Seems I didn't lose my engineering touch with age. Well, Mother did create a time machine. The car was a side project of hers. I would appreciate it if it was returned to me. It was a birthday present after all. She spoke with little confidence. Asking for something back was not in her education, and she wasn't really that attached for material goods, but the car was something special. Bulma giggled and agreed without question. Once the paper had printed, Krillin took a look at the photo, then walked a couple of steps to Trunks, who extended her hand to take it. Gohan also had a look. You got the picture now, right? It looks like it's been there a hot minute. Did you abandon it here 3 years ago? Bulma asked, impatient. Gohan had a little gasp looking at the familiar egg-shaped vehicle, covered in moss, with the pit somehow burnt. He looked up at Trunks' white face. The teen had recognized the time machine as well, despite its scruffy state. Where is it? Trunks almost growled, shifted. Gohan moved back to let the teenager get up. She did, paper in one hand, sword in the other, to walk towards Yamcha and the phone. As if she'd get closer to this Bulma that way. So it is yours. Where? Trunks demanded, more assertive, not quite shouting yet, and pointedly didn't answer the question. Let me check the envelope. Bulma asked for a little more time. Trunks clipped her sword on her back, folded the paper and put it in her pants pocket. She then reached for her capsule case. Yes, she still had all her capsules with the exception of the car. She checked on her watch for coordinates for Jinger Town. The town wasn't that far off from their current path, all things considered. I'll meet you there. The sector. Bulma gave coordinates. Trunks gave the voice all of her attention to burn the numbers in her memory, and moved to the side of the ride, intending on opening the door and going. She had a moment of common sense to put her hand on the lever, and look back to make sure her intentions were clear to everyone, except sleeping Goku, so they could prepare for the incoming wind draft. Gohan and Krillin had walked behind her. I'm coming too, the boy had decided. Trunks didn't fight him off, she barely even registered his words. She opened the door and took off slowly so as to now disturb the plane, then picked up speed. Gohan followed despite Chi-Chi's protests, and Krillin closed the door behind them. It's only when she arrived near the sector that her tunnel vision finally cleared, and Gohan's presence and words registered. That is your time machine, isn't it, Tora-san? I need to see it to be sure. Trunks flew down the forested area with Gohan, but both kept above the trees to be able to see and look for the machine. They separated to cover more terrain, as they'd done a few years prior when looking for the Dragon Balls. Gohan's keener eyes, more used to finding things in nature, was the first to spot the sun's light being reflected in a strange way in a prairie. He checked, then rose up again to call for the teenager, who came rushing. They both touched ground near the mossy machine. Trunks was still white as a sheet of paper and she walked around it, then hovered above it, looking every detail she could, not daring to touch it. Exactly like Gohan had scrutinized her machine 4 months ago or 2.5 years ago. She didn't register Gohan's words when he said he heard something, probably Bulma, and that he'd go and help her find them both. She lit herself a cigarette, trying to calm down her nerves a little. Only Bulma's voice calling her name while hopping off her small plane managed to take her eyes off the strange yet identical machine. Trunks. There you are. Look at your beautiful young mother. Bulma ran over, but frowned seeing her teenager kid smoke. Bulma-san, Trunks acknowledged with a little nod. So, what's this? It's yours. The genius looked at the vehicle she'd seen as a picture. I thought it was bigger, somehow. It is my time machine, but it is not my time machine. I have mine here in my case. Her voice shook, and she checked the capsule case once more, just to be sure she did not hallucinate. Pragmatism first. She took out the unlabeled capsule, pressed it and threw it next to the other. Bulma stood in wonder in front of the clean model that just poofed into existence, and took a good look at it. So this one is the one you used, the genius had to ask, while she walked to the other, rundown one, but not this one. Yes. I would have never left such a precious vehicle out in the open like this. I also never came close to this area, she said while blowing smoke after holding in a breath a little too long. At least 17 years old, from January 784 feet Trunks hadn't. But she wouldn't have left the machine laying there, regardless of her age, would she? Gohan hovered over the pit of the mossy version of the time machine, and dared to touch the edge of what he thought was burned. The glass dome is broken, perhaps the pilot was attacked. But there's no one inside. Just how many machines did future me made? Mother spent night and day working on it for over 3 years and using all resources just to build the one. Bulma-san, she tapped ash and finished the cigarette, much faster than she'd have had under normal circumstances. She finally braced herself to hover by the pit too, and after rubbing some moss off, pressed the button to open it. I have to look at its settings, she trembled. Did an alternate version of herself traveled and ended up in this same universe? There were already 2 Trunkses in this universe, at the moment. The implications were freaking her out. She hopped in the pit, but noticed a strange half-sphere on the mossy, pollen-filled seat. She found another one at her feet, and grabbed them both, then looked up, thinking they may have fallen in from the trees, but no tree branch was directly above the machine. A shell. But she was more interested in the machine's settings, so she handed them over to Gohan, who looked more interested in the new clue. Gohan put the two items together to form a sphere, staying stationary by the pit, and Bulma asked to see them as well. The boy brought them down while Trunks sat in the familiar pit and used her handkerchief to clean off some pollen from the commands and screens, then turned on the machine to access its inner computer's data. This looks like an eggshell of sorts, Bulma concluded, observing the details of the half-spheres, its purple color, its spikes, and the odd ochre coloring at the seam. But not from any creature I know of. Far too big. It also has some fibers, looks organic. Gohan went back up to the dome. Now it was open, he could squeeze underneath it and look more closely at the burn marks from the inside. Acid marks. What melted and attacked the glass-like top of the machine? He studied them carefully, touched a little more, and tapped a little the glass-like material to check how solid it actually was. At least as solid as the Capsule Corp spaceship. Trunks took a moment to put her hands underneath the consoles while everything else started to boot, and found what she was looking for: her mother's procedures notebook. She browsed the pages while inputting some commands to access the computer's data, her eyes darting from her mother's handwriting, to the console, to the other time machine. The fuel reserves were about half full according to the sensors, but most importantly, the origin and destination finally appeared: 787 to 763. Tora-san, Gohan called again, hovering in front of the teenager's seat, outside of the open pit, and he pointed up at the dome. Trunks had been staring at the numbers so intensely she'd forgotten about the two others and hadn't heard the first call. She blinked, looked at Gohan, then upwards, following what the child was trying to show her. He spoke low. He didn't want to worry Bulma. I don't think. Another you use the machine. It melted from the inside. From that weird egg, I think. Trunks stood in the pit, and looked closer at the hole in the plexiglass, and agreed with Gohan's educated conclusion. It seems like it. This machine arrived here 4 years ago. She sat down to confirm the dates again, and verified the information again. It also departed from the year 787. 3 years from my worlds, today. She put back the notebook in its place and eventually turned off the machine, stepped out of it and touched ground. So many questions. Trunks had a bad feeling about all of it. She had no reason to see why she or her mother would send an egg to the past, 3 years after this current trip she was in, let alone send it that far into the past. Bulma-san, I would like to borrow your laboratory. I need to run this through extensive diagnostics. She lit herself another nicotine stick. Her paranoid mind was worried about potential implications, and whether this arrival, prior to her first one, was the cause of the many changes between her world and this one. She also worried sick about that 787 version of her mother. She didn't register Bulma's light scolding her about the nasty habit, even if she agreed to lend her lab to the teenager. I found something. The two women heard Gohan's worried voice call out. They hadn't noticed him wandering off, so they ran towards the voice, one dropping the eggshells on the way, the other her cigarette. Bulma's external screech was as loud as the absolute disgust Trunks had by looking in the massive brown mold Gohan had found. Bulma, Trunks and Gohan found an abandoned time machine, whose dates indicated it left 3 years after Trunks, and arrived 4 years prior. While Bulma remembered her time with the teenager a couple of years prior, she only now understood why she felt he was so similar to Vegeta, beyond some physical similarities. Relentless, fearless, bold, lonely. She remembered the adjectives her martial artist's friends, and occasional acquaintances, were Tenshinhan and Piccolo, friends. Used when they talked about his power, his fighting ability. Stands up like it's nothing, does not flinch, probably fights a lot. But unlike Vegeta, their son, Trunks, didn't fight out of rage or pride. There was no pride. They may not have the same vibe, as this teenager acted more pleasant to be around, but both he and Vegeta were reserved and secretive. They just had very different strategies for dealing with curious people. When she first berated his smoking habit, she also saw cold and intense eyes, and in retrospect, she realized they were the same as Vegeta's. How he never retaliated against Vegeta's genuine attempts at killing him was self-preservation, but also a testament of the teen's resilience. His control and ability to stay still for hours, facing the vicious Vegeta's mental and physical attacks, only opened Bulma's imagination to how much the kid had suffered through to be able to remain calm. She regretted scolding his smoking habit, suddenly. His meek demeanor was just an act, she was now sure of it. She thought back to when he more or less ordered her to his room after his first fight with Vegeta. What she mistook for some sort of seducing attempt, oh Kami, was she wrong? The commanding and intimidating aura he displayed was also inherited. Bulma had feared something would happen that night, a big revelation of sorts, an act of violence, anything, but he just claimed, missed his mother. Only when Goku said out loud that Trunks, the baby, was surely Vegeta's kid, right before 19 and 20 attacked, did she consciously realize, Tora was that exact baby. He missed me, but he couldn't tell me. And everything else made sense. She slapped herself for trying to force him to open up, and thanked his incredible ability to resist her attempts, as her precious baby wouldn't have been born if he'd been anything but extremely cautious. Even when he stated he was not well and never would. How grim can the world be for a 16 years old to be so hardened, yet lucid? The mental strain would have broken anyone. He'd taken on the next day as if nothing had happened. She saw him, through the security cameras of the complex, sitting for hours on end with Tama, doing nothing but looking through a window, or spending time in the menagerie. Their shared worship for coffee, their work at the lab, it all seemed too familiar to the teenager, Bulma realized, because it was probably what he did in his world, with an older version of her. No wonder he could navigate her organized chaos, he was raised in that organized chaos. And he was that mentally resilient and prepared, because he was Trunks' brief. She thanked her future self for preparing him so well against, well, herself. I am truly a genius. Trunks never showed fear, but he barely showed confidence either. The teenager remained a mystery, despite his friendly vibe at her house and how long he stayed and shared meals with the briefs. If asked, Bulma realized she couldn't tell much about who that teenager was. His personality, his tastes, his aspirations, he guarded everything that hadn't been stated before. And he had to because she was Bulma brief. When Goku brought back the Dragon Radar the day after he left, she was disappointed he did not do it himself, and she even resented him for not saying proper goodbyes, but now she understood his stay at her house must have been an excruciating experience. And he took it all like it was nothing, with the exception of that first night's confession. Chi-Chi and her discussed the teenager one of their girl nights, and the Sun wife had also confirmed she didn't know much about the kid, private, shy, thoughtful. She did mention he said was home-schooled, and that his mother was a jack-of-all-trades engineer, which is, well, that was a solid definition of Bulma, after all. It was all confirmed when he answered to his actual name when Gohan was carrying her baby, and Yajirobe back to Capsule Corp. Bulma wanted to take him home too, apologize, properly hug his pain away, and do something about his hair. No wonder it looked dry and messy, the kid probably didn't use the right hair products for the delicate brief hair. Bulma was used to martial artists doing their own hair, like Yamcha, but she'd be damned if she let her son's beautiful lavender locks be mistreated any longer. Both this future one, and her little baby. At least the shaved side suited the teenager better than the last time she saw him, clearly the length was getting in the way. Her mind considered the circumstances the kid had described of his world. So it was probable her future self couldn't take care of her own hair either. Oh Bulma, how shallow can you be? Thinking about hair when the fate of the world is at stake, again. Yet, earlier that May 12th, his eyes betrayed far more about himself when he told her to take his car and fly home. She'd seen how relieved and happy he was when he saw himself as a baby, and she glanced over when Gohan explained to him the situation. She saw more in his demeanor. Determination, fury, resignation, despair. Like he'd fight a battle he had no hopes of winning. Like he'd fought that battle many times before. She wanted to stop him from going, that Vegeta would surely handle things, but he flew off before she could. When she saw this strange vehicle's photo once back home, and how the turbines were so similar to the car's design, she tried finding him at every phone number she could think of. And then Krillin finally called, and she was relieved to find out no one had died. He was pressing, assertive, he had dropped the layers of politeness when he asked where the vehicle was located. Bulma heard the panic on the voice when he repeated the request of the location. Had it been anyone else, she wouldn't have accepted giving the information, requested he come to her, be more polite, anything, but instead she accepted it was something grave and she decided to go and meet him there. And when she saw him looking at that vehicle, her heart ached. He was white. He was trembling. He didn't hear her, nor Gohan, he was too focused on this other time machine. Trunks did not feel fear, but right there and there, what she saw in those eyes was terror of the unknown. The giant molt was nightmare fuel for Bulma. She hid behind her would-be future son, and he acted protective of her when they rushed over to Gohan's call, moving his left arm to guard her. Only when Gohan said it was just a molt, and as such, wasn't anything alive, did she relax a little. Only a little. That thing was still absolutely horrific. She held onto Trunks' denim, ignoring the layer of pollen he'd gotten from sitting in the abandoned machine, and stayed firmly behind him, finding a sense of security with the physical touch and being behind her protective son, peeking only by looking over his shoulder at the horrible display. That's not a cicada. She choked on her words. Gohan confirmed. He knew all sorts of bugs, but this wasn't one of them. I think that's what came out of the egg that was inside the machine. Gohan confirmed Bulma's fears and gulped. So that thing came from the future. Geez, what kind of radioactivity did the cyborgs cause in their destruction? Bulma tried to joke, but her grip on her son got tighter. Clearly this was a monster, not a mutant. There's no nearby lifeforms. Trunks breathed, and once Bulma had released him, she stayed behind, looking at her son moving forward towards the strange item, and knelt to look at it more closely. Knowledge was the weapon against the unknown, but Bulma was too scared to wield it. Trunks and Gohan had a good look at the skin that was shed by the animal. It was hard, hollow, with a large slit on its back. Gohan went on to look where it came from, precisely, while Trunks eventually touched the mold, grabbed it, and opened it to look more closely inside. She pulled her left sleeve up and reached in, thinking she saw something inside. The warm goo touching her skin sent a shiver down her spine, and she moved back, looking at the substance on her hand. It seems the creature nested somewhere under those bushes. Gohan pointed at a burrow he'd noticed nearby, more or less between the skin's location and the time machine. And came out to change skins. It's fresh. Trunks wiped off the goo on her handkerchief. It came out recently. Wherever the creature was, it left not too long ago. I'm having a bad feeling about this. Trunks and Gohan both also shared the unease, but neither had the will to admit it. Bulma was already nervous enough, so confirming her fears would do no good. Ah, of course Trunks, you can use my lab, it's your home so no need to ask. I'm going home. Coming too. Bulma felt like she needed to be gone right about now, but she hadn't forgotten the teenager's request before Gohan's finding interrupted them. Trunks shook her head, still staring at the mold with an expression full of questions. Thank you. I still have a few things to do, but I will be there shortly. The time traveler didn't move an inch while Gohan walked Bulma back to her plane, and Trunks could hear him mention he'd be at Kame House in case anything happened. It took Trunks a few long minutes to finally make sure of something else, as she walked back to the machines and rubbed the moss out of one of the side of the turbines, revealing a word that had been written by her mother before she took off the first time. Hope. Despite all other evidence, this was what fully made Trunks realize it was indeed her time machine. She hovered back up to properly turn the vehicle's onboard computer off, then closed the pit. She stayed there, looking at the seat through the gaping hole at its dome for a little while. Tora-san. Gohan called her over, again, as the first time clearly didn't register. She finally came down with a little apologetic look. My apologies, I've gotten lost in thoughts. It's worrying, how you do this. Gohan gestured, unable to actually put into words the whole thing he'd felt from the teenager when his mom corrected baby Trunks' birth month. It's nothing, she tried to reassure, looking back at the hope scribble on the mossy machine. Gohan had seen it as well as the one on the other model. The lie that it was nothing didn't sit well with the child. Mom often says that when there's a problem, it's good to voice it out and bounce it with someone else. Clears the mind. Do you want to try? How could she deny such logic? Voicing the issue could be helpful, and Gohan always reassured her. Even if this version was much younger, he was still a smart, pragmatic kid. She slid her fingers down further on the machine to remove the rest of the moss, revealing the button to turn it down into a capsule, and pressed it. I guess I could. She had a small sigh, and turned her own machine back into her capsule, and put them both in her case, putting one upside down to differentiate them, then sat slouched under a tree, her right forearm resting on her knee, capsule case in hand, trying to find a way to word her thoughts. Gohan followed her, and sat by her left side like he'd done a few times at that point. Gohan-san, you keep calling me Tora, she remarked, then looked inquisitive, a raised eyebrow punctuating the question. Even if you know who I am. Why? That's because that's what you asked us to call you. Gohan looked down, a little red in the face, ashamed he may have made a mistake by not correcting once he'd understood her true identity. I don't mind being called Trunks, it is my name, but in this world, Trunks is him, not me. So, it makes me happy you kept using Tora. Reassured, Gohan nodded. I'll keep using it then. Should I tell the others? It's already confusing enough, they've decided to switch to anchor my identity. It's fine. As for this, she made a little gesture with her right hand, holding the capsule case, indicating both the mold and the capsules the case contained. She only continued after a moment to gather her thoughts. I think my mind is having a hard time dealing with the wider implications of my own existence. The dragon said I was from another universe, and yet, another, my time machine, appeared here, and before my first trip. The mother and me in 787 have certainly died at the hands of whomever sent that creature here. Is that my fate? This machine had crossed both her green trip and her red, unfinished trip. And perhaps more. She wasn't certain about the death of her 787 self, but she couldn't fathom any other outcome that would lead to someone but her or Bulma using the machine. She'd still like to be certain, but that was the only hypothesis she could consider. And even if they had chosen to send something to the past themselves, they would have chosen to land somewhere else, somewhere safe to be found, or have programmed a way to send a message to someone to retrieve it. Nothing they'd send would end up leaving the time machine in the middle of nowhere, it was too precious. Trunks wanted to run a full diagnosis to see whether there was a message encoded in the computer, a reason as to why it had arrived there and then. Different worlds or not, there are two of me currently in this world. There could have been three, if I went to meet my past me gathering the Dragon Balls, 4 months ago, and asked for the wish to find Dr. Gero's lab. What did 787 me know? Had the Trunks found this machine as well? Is it going to be me, when I return, or yet another, Trunks? She brought back her capsule pack to her and put it away in her pocket, then stretched her leg down to reach for the cigarette pack and get herself a proper nicotine dose, as the previous one was discarded unceremoniously. She held the cigarette in her right hand, instead of her usual left, mindful of Gohan's proximity. The boy listened with great attention to the teenager walking through everything. This was no algebra problem, but he still tried to follow. A puff of tobacco later, Trunks let out another long sigh. Those two machines intruded in your world and changed everyone's fate, and I wonder what that means. After all, I am talking to someone who is dead in my world, that cannot go without a price. Fundamental laws of the universe. Universes. My existence in this world is a lie, and you've never questioned it. Gohan-san isn't the kind to believe in lies. She ended up pointing at herself, indicating she believed she was the lie she was referencing. She saw him look back at her, taking in the implied question. I don't think you're a lie, Tora-san. Am I not? I shouldn't be here. My presence in this dimension is questionable, but it is also a sinful prowess, and this, she indicated the mold with her half-finished cigarette, is perhaps the cost of my desire to change history. Hell is paved with good intentions. Gohan kept quiet for a little while, looking at those jaded blue eyes which were staring straight ahead. He tried making sense of the time traveler's problem existential crisis, without a doubt. He watched his breathing, paced by the slow smoking, the little circles he created out of shallow fun. This was the true Tora he'd wanted to meet for over 2 years. He appreciated how earnest the teenager had been, how he'd opened up to him, a child, whom he used honorifics with. And yet, he couldn't really grasp at the complexity of the thoughts that plagued his friend. He instead went back to core facts, the actions, the life of his father who should survive his illness thanks to this older kid's decisions. He got closer and pulled at the teenager's jacket to get him to meet his eyes. You've come here to save my dad and our world. Your heart and actions aren't sinful, Tora-san. Your time machine has the word, hope, on it, right? If that's a bad thing, then I don't care for any punishment, I'll fight for you, because it's the right thing to do. Gohan was firm and assertive in his response. Trunks half chuckled at the conclusion this past version of Gohan had come up with about her turmoil. She smiled back at him and moved her left arm to pull him into a soft hug, and the young kid was happy to hug back. This wasn't her Gohan, but it might as well have been. Concrete, pragmatic, grounding, reassuring. She'll get to 787 when she'll get there. La Apple du Vide could wait. As expected of Gohan-san. I suppose you're right, thank you. Mother often said I was the kind to think and worry about things too much. Let's fight together, then. Part of how I have Trunks talk and consider her existence in the main timeline is inspired by how he's represented in the Doujinshi Gracias written by pals, Shin Minazuki back in 1992-1996, by the way smiley face. L'appel du vide is a French expression which means the call of the void, it's a form of intrusive thoughts.